Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here for episode 3 of JaAR, which stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. And so I am clearly Joe.
And I'm Amy.
She wasn't happy with that. It's redundancy. I appreciate redundancy. And so we are here today, once again, to talk about the Shadows over Innistrad story. You can see that from the title down below. But still, we are here to talk about part 3 of the story, here on episode 3. And we are here to talk about Unwelcome, which is the name of this story. And it ties into Jace. And what I think is interesting is they don't segue too well, I think, from Oath of the Gatewatch. They clearly mentioned that he was on Zendikar and that now he's on Innistrad. And at the end of the Oath of the Gatewatch story, they said that he was planning on looking for Sorin to help tie up the loose ends from the Oath of the Gatewatch and from what Ugin was talking to him about. And he doesn't mention Ugin by name, but he mentions Ugin a couple of times. And because it's who he's looking for Sorin because of Ugin. And he also mentions Nahiri, also not by name. Maybe he doesn't know Nahiri's name. He clearly knows Ugin's, though. He's said it before. But so Jace was in this one, and it starts off with Jace kind of riding a horse, being led by a guide. He wasn't, going any quickly at all or anything. But riding a horse, being led by a guide, going through Innistrad. Like I said, they don't kind of fully explain. I am the kind of guy who would appreciate if they did. Why didn't he appear closer? Is that not how planeswalking works? I don't know that I necessarily fully understand, but he's clearly knew where Liliana... Oh, no, actually, I guess if he had a guide, he wouldn't know where Liliana's place was. Spoilers, I guess. He was looking for Liliana to start so that she could help him.
It's not spoilers. Because if you're watching this video, you already read the stories, right?
What she said.
Because if you didn't, go back and read the
stories.
Go
do that. We always recommend that. This is not meant to be a synopsis. It's a review, so definitely go do that. This was a short story.
Yes.
Very short in comparison to the other two, which, hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this was a normal length story and the other two were just really long. But the other two, and I will say the other two were really long. The first two were really long. I'm sure in the beginning there was an annotation for you guys to go check out those other two videos. You definitely should after you've read them. If you haven't already. But definitely go check those out. And so those two stories were really long. This one was really short. And besides... the guide, Jace and Liliana were the only speaking characters in the entire story, whereas last time I had notes of everyone's names and, they were jumping back and forth about 5 different times between settings, and this just followed Jace start to finish, which, to a degree, I guess I kind of expected that was going to happen. Just because it's Jace, and I think I said that too last time, that they probably wouldn't be cutting away from Jace frequently to go anywhere else. Yeah. And then not only was it Jace, but then it was Liliana, because he got to see Liliana despite the fact that his guide turned into a werewolf, ate his horse, and then howled, calling for at least 4 other werewolves to chase down Jace. And what I find really interesting is, I guess because of the power level of the Jace cards, clearly the new Jace Planeswalker card was at the beginning of this, and I don't know whether that was what spoiled the card, and so they're taking into account what obviously not because I said it, but they're taking into account what I mentioned last time, which is that they should use the story to spoil the cards, or if the card had been spoiled and then they put it up. But it also wasn't done the way they usually do it, which is just the picture of Jace, and then if you mouse over the name, it shows the card. The first picture, right at the beginning, you didn't even have to scroll to see it, was just the Jace Unraveler of Secrets card, which I think is cool and exactly what I talked about and exactly what I wanted. Like I said, I don't know if that was the way that card was spoiled or if that was released in some other manner or fashion. Yeah. Either way, it was there and I appreciated it because, like I said before, the Avacyn card had already been spoiled before the Avacyn story, and no matter what, her picture that was there didn't have the name of the card under it for you to look at superimposed, and isn't that the point, right? The stories are really cool, but you're a company, you're trying to sell a product, and I can read these stories for free, so maybe you make some ad money off of me coming to your site, which is totally fine, but at the same time, you want me to go buy the cards, and if I don't know what the cards do, maybe I don't come and buy it. So that's my business rant for a second there.
That's a fair point.
But, so Jace got chased down by werewolves. I think between Oath of the Gatewatch and this set, and, well, I'm sorry, the Zendikar, Battle for Zendikar block and this set, they're kind of making Jace look weak. Like, they keep talking about all the cool things that he could do, but he doesn't do any of them.
I think they're building up to something.
Well, because, like, yeah, I mean, it's just like, you know, like, Jace was like, well, I've got plans when he was on Zendikar, you know, but he was like, he realized when he was walking around, he's like, well, I'm useless against Eldrazi because I can't control their minds. And then while he was here, he's like, well, I'm useless against zombies because I can't control their minds. And he's like, my telekinesis is bad because that's not strong. It's only as strong as my own muscles are. So it really made him look kind of pathetic. And I guess to a degree, that's kind of the way of making you think like, oh, he's vulnerable, as opposed to like, you know, an almighty Superman type character where you're like, well, what does he have to fear? There's no issues.
Yeah.
So I can see it to a degree, but at the same time, like, he's your poster boy. He's your Mickey Mouse. Like, why are you making him look like he's so incapable? Although, like you said, I'm sure in the future he will not be incapable and will kind of deal with it.
I think they're gonna get to a point where, you know, we kind of see things build and build and build and build, and then we see a breaking point of him just going nuts and getting shit
and
done.
unleashing on people. Yeah, and you know what? I think that'd be awesome just to see, like,
I do too.
What really happens when... Now, ironically enough, what really would happen if he became an unbound telepath, which I say that because there was a card called Telepath Unbound. So, and it was just okay, if I remember correctly. And in fact, from what I've seen of people talking about it, and also my own assessment, the Jace Unraveler of Secrets card is garbage. It's just really bad. Like, it's not good for standard. It's cool. Like, the picture is awesome. I will never... very rarely do I see a piece of art and I'm like, this is bad art, but I would definitely say it if I thought so. You know, I'm not against doing that. But the card's not good. Like, the power level of the card's not good. In Limited, I'm sure it'll be insane because it's a Planeswalker, and if you get a Planeswalker, any Mythic really in Limited, you're happy because it's greater than the power level of almost anything else in the entire draft. So, congrats. You know, if you open it at pre-release, congrats. Use it if you can. But the other thing is, I mean, there are 4 Planeswalkers in this set, which is crazy. And again, we're kind of going back to what we talked about last time, which is that you've already spoiled a lot of these cards, and so the story is taking shape in the cards very disjointedly, and yet we kind of, like, we're getting spoilers about the story in the spoilers of the set, which I don't really appreciate, just because I want to be surprised when I read these things.
Yeah.
I totally understand why they're doing it from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
But at the same time...
not everybody's going to take the time to go online and read these stories.
But at the same time, like I said, I think that they would have to put out more than one story a week to catch up. But I think that they could have the stories coincide well with leading up to the set release. And all that would do is... I would have no way of knowing by reading the story what any of these cards would do. You know, the cool picture at the end of the last story with Avacyn, where she's flying through the city and everything's on fire and she's just floating through, which was the culmination of the entire story. It was a beautiful piece of art, and it's on a common. It's on a common burn spell.
Wow.
That does an okay effect, don't get me wrong, but it's a common. And there's 2 sides to that, right? The one side is that even though it's a common, they worked, whoever the artist is, and I apologize for not knowing, I can't just have that encyclopedic knowledge of artists, although I respect them greatly. The fact that they put that much detail into a common is fantastic.
Yeah, it says a lot.
Yes, because you want the mythics and the rares to look striking. Because you want someone to turn from that last uncommon when they open their pack, or, you know, turn from the token in the back to see that rare or mythic and have it just jump right off the card at you. But the fact that a common is doing the exact same thing is just fantastic. You know, I wouldn't blame an artist if they got a common to draw and they kind of just phoned it in. You know, it was just okay.
Yeah.
But that artist and many, I mean, I've seen lots of art and it all looks great. But I don't think that they've done that. You know, they obviously, these people are professionals, and so they're doing their jobs no matter what the card is, especially because sometimes some of them don't even play. You know, they're just artists and they just do what they're asked to do for drawing, and whether that they're drawing for a common, an uncommon, a rare, a mythic, or a token. You know, they're going to put the work in to draw that card really well, or a basic land, although basic lands are kind of a different game. But anyway, so back to the story. Sorry for the segue again. So
What
Jace,
were we talking about?
yeah, exactly. Unwelcome. So Jace is going through, and he finally gets up to Liliana's courtyard, and I thought it was really funny the language that they use, because Amy was able to pick up on this and I did not. When they get up to Liliana's manor, house, courtyard, whatever you want to call it, there were wrought iron gates, and that's when he mentioned about his telekinesis not being strong, but that it's very fine-tuned, because he was able to kind of use telekinetic mind fingers, or mental fingers, as they put it, to go into the locking mechanism of the gate, trip the tumblers, and open the gate. And then it was hard for him to open it because the gates were rusted, he said. And he said it made enough of a noise to wake the dead. Now, that's just for the flavor of the set, right? It's gothic. There are zombies in the set. So they just say it's a noise enough to wake the dead. Plus, that's just a phrase, you know, common vernacular kind of a thing.
But there's a reason why it's there.
And Amy said, let's see if it is loud enough to wake the dead. And sure enough, they're like, Jace kicks the gate closed, locks it up again, and the werewolf, you know, comes up and then runs away. And then
Next thing you know,
zombies sprout up.
Zombies.
And they come walking towards him. And again, he gets scared because he's like, these things don't have brains. And it's like, dude, really?
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I picked up on that Amy, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you really thought that the coat, like when he mentioned the coat in the beginning, that was just a throwaway comment, that like he had bought himself a nice new leather coat.
Yeah,
and
it's like, okay, like who cares?
And they mention, like, you know, it was a nice new leather coat, and then at one point when he's running away from the werewolves, he falls off of his horse because his horse gets slashed at. He falls off of his horse and rolls in the mud. And I made the comment, I was like, oh, his brand new coat, like it's all muddy. And Amy's like, all right,
who cares? I don't care.
So sure enough, when Jace gets in to see Liliana, the banter begins right away, which, first of all, the banter was perfect.
Hilarious.
Perfect between those two.
So good.
And again, I'll touch on something else in a second that Amy was able to kind of predict. But Liliana just looked at him and was like, hello, Jace. Nice coat. And I looked at him and I was like, see? It was important. It mattered. So, like, just the fact that he had this nice new coat, and, like, I feel like I've seen it in all the art, like that overcoat that he's wearing, like the leather overcoat. Although I will say, in the art, there was a piece of art with Jace standing in front of Liliana, kind of with his arms out to the sides, at her when she's at her throne, and she's got zombies all around her. It's late, sorry. But she's got zombies all around her, and Jace kind of has his arms out, and I promise you, I looked to see if that coat was dirty. And in the picture, it wasn't. It didn't show any mud. Yeah, sorry. I care about those things. I noticed it. I know you didn't. I cared. And I looked to see if the coat was dirty, and the coat was not dirty. And I was like, really? He just said he was rolling around in the mud. Do you think he'd have a little bit of dirt on him? Or maybe he can, for those of you that know D&D, maybe he can cast Prestidigitation and just clean himself off. But
He's too picky.
I'm a little picky. But still. Anyway, so when Jace gets up to the manor, those zombies that popped up turned out to just be a welcoming committee, as Jace called it, which I think is really funny, right? I don't know that Liliana, I mean, maybe she was like standing by the window and saw him coming up or whatever, but I don't know how Liliana's control of the zombies works. Where can she tell them something that requires deduction? You know, if you see Jace Bellerin walk up to him and then move out of the way. You know what I mean? As opposed to like walk up to anyone who walks through the gate and move out of the way. Did she know he was coming? You know, I'm not exactly sure how that works, how her control over the zombies works, but because when they were in the actual throne room, she like, her eyes glowed purple, and a couple of them, you know, came over, and like one brought a drink, and then the other ones kind of swarmed Jace at one point. But she's standing right there. She's seeing what they're seeing. So I don't know if she can see through their eyes, or if she can, again, tell them to do something.
But half of them didn't even have eyes.
Amy loved that line. Not that I didn't, but because Jace was putting up illusions of himself to try to counter the zombie attack, and Jace comments that half of them didn't even have eyes, and so what good is an illusion?
No, he did the invisibility.
Oh, invisibility, you're right. You're absolutely right.
He tried to hide by
You're absolutely right.
making himself invisible, and then, you know, they were still coming at him, and then he realized only half of them have eyes anyway, so obviously it's not a visual thing. Yes,
which you loved. I thought that was funny. The banter was incredible between those two, as we said. Super funny. So if you're still at this point in the review and you really haven't read it yet, literally, if you just go to read that banter between the two of them, go and read the whole thing. But if you just go to read the banter between the two of them, you will not regret it. It is super funny. You know what? I will say as well, this story was short, but at the beginning of this story, it referenced back to the last time that these two saw each other at the end of the Magic Origins story. So I guess you could argue that this story is shorter because it requires you to read a previous story to have...
At the end of Magic... Oh, okay, yeah, no, sorry.
At the end of the Magic Origins story, where it literally, I think the story was actually literally called Catching Up. So it was talking about like what has happened since... right before the Battle for Zendikar story, where Gideon's going around looking for help for Zendikar, and Jace and Liliana are talking, and they mentioned it, I think, once or twice in Oath of the Gatewatch, and they mentioned it again now with the chain veil that Liliana has, and I don't fully know that story, but it was from M15, and Liliana has it, and Jace doesn't know where it is, and he knows that it's a threat, like it's a big threat.
Yeah, they really alluded to that, but... we don't really know.
No, and I can almost guarantee
about that.
If it comes up in Eldritch Moon, maybe, but I assume that it won't come up for a while, just because they're dealing with so much now on Innistrad with other things going on. But because they also talked about Garrick, which, to be honest, if and when that happens, and we're still making these videos, you guys will hear me get super excited. I love Garrick. He's been cursed when he became that black-green planeswalker, going from a green planeswalker to a black-green planeswalker. I thought it was fantastic. I can see from a business standpoint how they did that so that Liliana could be the main, or not Liliana, excuse me, wow. Nissa could be the main green planeswalker. Because one, that was the direction they were going in. Two, kind of as we talked about, it's more female representation, which at that point I'm not upset about. You know, I talked about that in the first episode, but... Garruk is now black-green, or at least was, because he was cursed with Liliana's black magic because he attacked her. And so it's kind of a toss-up, and Jace kind of references that as well. And it's a lot of different things that are callbacks, but I also assume call forwards, you know, just to like say, in the future we're going to deal with this. Right now I need your help. Right. And I liked...
So it's like foreshadowing at the same time as it being, remember this thing that we mentioned before?
Don't forget
Here's
it.
Kind of why it's important, but you only get a little taste of why it's important, because in the future is when you'll actually find out why it's important.
And it's just so that in 3 months you're not like, or in 6 months or a year or whatever, you're not like, what's the chain veil again? What are they talking about? Because like you'll know.
They're like, wait, here's the important stuff that you need to remember. Yeah. You know, we're letting you know what the stuff you need to remember is ahead of time, so that when you get there, it's not terrible.
Exactly. So. I appreciated the fact that, and this I think, if you had not read the previous Innistrad or Shadows over Innistrad stories, 1 and 2, you could still follow this one perfectly. Yeah. It called back to Oath of the Gatewatch, and it called back to the Magic Origins, like I talked about. There was only one time, I think, where it called back to the previous 2 stories here, and it was when Liliana said that there are worse things that you have to worry about in Innistrad than werewolves. and it's angels. And Jace is like, yes, I understand you don't like angels because you're evil and they're not. And she's like, no, I don't think you get it there. And then she kind of stopped because she realized, like, why am I helping him? There's no reason for me to help him. Yeah. So she's like, all right, whatever. You do whatever you want, but I wouldn't trust angels if I were you. And that's kind of all she says about it, which, again, we know that the angels are killing people.
Right.
That they've become evil and they're killing everybody but Sigarda. I almost didn't think I would remember her name. But everybody but Sigarda.
That was also kind of a way of them letting us know to what extent Jace knows that, which is 0.
And to what extent Liliana knows that. Because if she's been sitting in this tower, she might not know or care.
Right, yeah.
But she does. And it also kind of sets up, I mean, we know Soren's in this set, at least as a card. We know Nahiri is in this set, at least as a card. So we know that these things are coming up. We're going to see Soren, we're going to see Nahiri. And Jace talks about...
I loved that Nahiri card that you showed.
The art is beautiful.
So gorgeous.
The art is beautiful. And from what I can tell, just from seeing art from the set, the background of that card, with everything like crumbling and kind of falling in different directions, and some of the stuff, it looks like some rubble is falling up, so maybe it's not like actually crumbling, maybe that's just how it is.
Like an explosion, you know?
Well, no, because from what I've seen, I think that's Markov matter. And I think that from the looks of it, I think that may just be how Markov matter, either how it always is or how it looks now. And you can see, again, they've been spoiling these cards for us, so we can talk about it, but there's a card where Soren is, I think it's called Declaration in Stone, where Soren is walking through his manor and he's looking around and there's just vampires kind of fused inside of those columns. Remember that picture?
Yeah.
And it said that the flavor text talked about the fact that Soren knew that Nahiri was there. So those two are at conflict with one another, apparently, even though they were friends when they imprisoned the Eldrazi, or at least companions when they imprisoned the Eldrazi together.
I guess,
the enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of a thing. So they at least work together then. It doesn't look like that's going to be happening now. So I'm sure we'll see that soon. The kind of spoiler or like couple of lines that they use for the next story talks about something coming out of the water, which means nothing to me unless they're talking about the Drown Yard, which I don't even know that you know what that is, but it's a land, like there's like a big basin that comes out of the water. I don't know how they're going to do that. We'll see. I could be totally wrong, and you can find out next week what we think of that and what happened with that. But the banter between them was great, and Amy kept saying throughout, I don't know if you want to take this, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It doesn't matter.
All right, so Amy was saying throughout the whole thing, she's saying, with the way that these two are talking to each other, she's like, they're talking to each other like they're exes. Like these two...
Because they're exes.
These two got something going on, right? Like they... And it really was like the last time they saw each other, it was a conflict, right? Jace wanted to know all these things. Liliana was being coy about it. He mentions how much older Liliana is than he, but she looks like she's the same age and still very able-bodied.
Cougar.
Yeah, gross. Super cougar, like eternal cougar. But she looks super young. Like she got a very young body. If we're gonna get sexual about it, like she's gorgeous and wearing very few clothing or very little clothing. And she really is. I mean, for a fantasy game that they kind of target towards nerdier, geekier guys, at least originally, she's really one of the few planeswalkers where they have her like super scantily clad, like
a sexy planeswalker.
Yes, I mean Kiora to a degree is like that too, but she's a fish woman, so it's weirder.
I don't know.
All right. But and like I mean, but at the same time, like
I think they tried to make Kiora powerful, but I don't, but I don't think they tried to make her sexy.
Okay. Well, and then depending on what you're into, the angels as well are very are very wearing very low cut outfits or whatever. So like that as well, and like very flowing, and they always look beautiful. In the original Innistrad, now they look fucking evil. Like they're super evil now, so that's fine. But like that's just how they look now, is just evil. And like if you're into that sort of thing, I guess sexy, definitely not something that I looked at and I was like, oh, look at how pretty they look now. Like no, they look terrifying and badass. Yes, at the same time. So Liliana and Jace are talking, and Amy keeps saying they're exes, and it's just witty banter back and forth, and it would be the kind of thing where in a movie you'd be like, just kiss her already, like Just get it over with.
Or like, okay, in the next scene, they're gonna be having sex.
Right. And so at one point, Jace says, I'm going to go see Soren. And Liliana's like, don't do it. He's super old. Like, he's older. And Jace knows that Soren is older than she is and knows that she is super old. And yet Liliana is aware enough to say, don't do it. It's very bad. He'll kill you. And Jace is like...
Or if you go to the manor, they'll kill you.
Well,
Soren's not even there.
Because that was the same... That was the next thing.
They'll think that you know something about him or want to get in touch with him or anything, they'll kill you.
Because something that I was not aware of, and maybe it was mentioned previously, Soren is not embraced by his people, by vampires. They don't like him, and they are in Markov Manor, and he is not. And so if he were to go to Markov Manor, they would try to kill him. But if Jace were to go to Markov Manor asking about Soren, like Amy said, Liliana was like, don't do that. And I think that was when Jace was like, you are concerned about me, and kind of like alluded to it again. And, yeah, and so Liliana's like, whatever, I don't care. And then Jace is like, Jace realizes that she's not going to help, so he kind of decides to leave, right? And he just says, well, and after Liliana had warned him, don't go see Soren, don't go to Markov Manor, Jace is like, all right, well, if you're not going to help me, I'm just going to leave. And as he's leaving, he says, I'll go to Markov Manor myself, taunting her again because she clearly just told him not to do that and that he could die.
But also like a way to tell her, like, look, this is where I'm going to be, so, maybe make sure I'm not dead.
So her retaliation to it is, as he turns around and walks away, she sits down. She's already sitting on the throne or whatever, and the zombies just start coming towards him. And in the back of his mind, he knows that she's not going to hurt him. But at the same time, like, the zombies are, like, getting really close to him. And that was when he turned invisible, and it didn't work, as we talked about before. And he's throwing up illusions and trying to cast spells and stuff, but some of them are working, some of them aren't, and there are too many zombies for him to combat. Yeah. And so they eventually get up to him, and they're just grabbing him and, like, holding him by the throat. And so he's trying to talk to Liliana, and Liliana says, he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm making a point. And I think it was showing him, like, don't go up against an army of anything here.
Yeah.
Don't go up against these werewolves that you had trouble against. Don't go up against these zombies because they could kill you. Don't go up against vampires. Like, you're out of your element.
Yeah.
And even mentioned that, I don't remember, I think it was Liliana mentioned that Soren allows Liliana to be in Innistrad. And basically said to her, like, play nice. Play nice here or I will kill you. And Liliana in no way made it seem like she thought that was not the case. She was like, no, I know he'll kill me. Like, I play nice here, and it was like a warning to Jace of, like, he could kill me, and I command an entire army of the undead. Don't go after him alone, mind mage. And what she said, which I thought was interesting, was, don't go up against someone whose mind you can't or won't touch. And I don't know, again, because I don't know their full past well enough, I don't know whether that's a call back or a call forward or both, in that, she just knows that he's not comfortable trying to read Soren's mind, or if Soren's mind can't be read.
Well, I thought it was interesting because she basically said that she didn't know him. No,
Soren.
Right.
Yeah.
She kind of only met him and sort of knows a little bit about him, but she doesn't really know him.
Right.
Which confused me a little bit because I felt like in that particular spot and a couple other particular spots, she said some things that were kind of personal about him that made me go, are you sure you don't know him? Are you just telling Jace you don't know him because you don't want Jace to know you know him?
Yeah, but I think...
Or do you know some things about him that a friend wouldn't know?
Well, and Jace...
Or that a friend would know and someone who wasn't a friend would not know.
Right. And Liliana might be, or Jace might be perceptive enough to have picked up on that if she was, like, saying those things, but then, like, talking out of both sides of her mouth kind of a thing, like saying she doesn't know him and then saying personal stuff. But there's also no way of knowing, like I said, you don't know how she communicates with the zombies, right? Can she hear what the zombies hear? Yeah. Can she have a zombie outside of Markov Manor? Does she just hear things throughout the town that people talk about? I don't know. I don't know if they'll ever explain that to us. I feel like I would not be surprised if they don't. But it is a fair question. But that was the story, right? I'm sorry.
But that particular quote made me think, okay, she knows that Soren's mind is a place that Jace doesn't want to go.
Right.
Because it would be such a traumatic experience for him.
Well, and
or dangerous.
And Jace mentioned that Liliana was centuries old, but that Soren was millennia old. That's old. Like, he's been around for a long time, and so I also wouldn't be surprised if maybe Jace knows as well that, like, tapping into a mind that has seen millennia pass is dangerous, right? You have the knowledge of millennia that you can look at any time when you're around this person, but would that be too much for you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, would that be too much for... Soren gathered all that knowledge over millennia. He didn't gain it all at one time. Mm-hmm. And for Jace to gain it all at one time, that might be way too much. You know what I mean? Like, Jace...
Yeah, I mean, his brain could just explode.
Right, exactly.
For all we know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. That's kind of what I took out of that, was like, maybe that's why you don't want to read...
I thought that there was a lot more... I took it a different way. I was like, okay, well, maybe there's so many horrible demons in his past that Jace couldn't mentally, emotionally handle, I should say.
And Soren's also a vampire. So there's that concept of unending hunger and insatiable thirst.
Right.
And would Jace pick up on that as well? And would that make him thirst for blood as a there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there'll be answers. I wouldn't know that. But and then I think I was going to say that's the story. But the last thing I think that's pertinent to mention, because we mentioned about Amy's comment about them being exes, my comment to her after the story was over was, Amy was like, well, they're exes. I was like, apparently not yet. But when Jace finally was like, I have to go to Markov Manor, and he's like, if you're not going to help me, I'm just going to go on my own. And I don't remember. It was her who mentioned, she was like, well, at least go in the morning.
Yeah.
And he was like, are you inviting me to stay the night? And she like got really close to him and like put her lips up to his ear and like whispered to him.
Got all sexy,
And she referenced the fact that his heart was beating faster, and his face was flushing, and he was like blushing and like getting turned on almost. And in Jace's mind, because we're hearing it from Jace's perspective, in Jace's mind, the idea flashed in his head of like, oh, am I going to go to bed with this woman now?
Yeah.
And Liliana's response to that, again, talking about awesome banter, was don't flatter yourself. There's a guest room.
Yeah.
And it's in the basement. It's a dungeon.
It's a dungeon.
So it was just perfect, and that just caps it off. We did not talk about all the banter. Definitely check it out, like I said. But I thought the story...
But that was great, because it really, really showcases Liliana's personality. And that's really what you want in a story that's going to feature her so prominently.
Yes. And
is really give us a taste of what her personality is. Since before it was almost more what you decided her personality was.
Yeah.
Because of her cards.
Right.
And
now she is not in this set as a card, because there are already 4 planeswalkers, so good God, how many more do we want? I assume because she is on the promo art for Eldritch Moon, which is the next set coming out, that she'll be in Eldritch Moon. That's just my guess. I'm almost certain of it, in fact, just because Jace was on the promo art for here and he came out, even though there's already a Jace legal and standard thanks to Magic Origins.
Well, maybe that's why they made this one
crappy. Oh, 100% that's why.
Yeah.
Absolutely that's why. Because the Jace that's currently in standard, at least at the time of filming, or maybe a week or two ago, I'm a little out of touch in terms of pricing, but the last time I checked, that Jace was $100. And that's way too much money. For a standard card, that's way too much money, because it's not a fetch land. You know what I mean? Like, it's a flip planeswalker, not a fetch land, which just happened to be in standard, but it's also used for modern. Once the Eldrazi decks kind of go away, it'll be used for modern. But that's another topic for a different time. But so
that's a driving to the draft video.
It may be. We'll see. But yeah, so it's we're getting closer. We're 2 weeks away from the pre-release at this point. In the United States, if you're out of the country, and if you don't celebrate, that's fine. But next Sunday is Easter Sunday. And then the Sunday after, or the Friday, Saturday, Sunday after is pre-release. So
I can't believe it's coming up so quickly.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Snuck up on me.
The cards, I really only had a chance to really look at the spoilers yesterday, and we were all looking at them as a group, all of us from the channel, because we got together to do some recording. And we got together and we were looking at these cards. They're beautiful. They're awesome. Dave, which I thought was very interesting, Dave from the channel, who does all of our camera work on our Magic openings, as well as plays Jareth in our RPG show.
Yes.
Jareth/Chad. What Dave was mentioning was he looked at one picture, and I genuinely don't remember if he knew this about the set or not. I leaned towards the fact that he didn't, but he looked at it and he was like, "That looks very gothic." And I was like, "Yeah, that's the theme of the set." But what I can tell you is he was able to look at one picture and say that. To show, if you need any further proof that this set, between the art and the story, is just everything that it needs to be,
right.
That's where it needs, that's what shows it, right?
Right.
Someone who may, and I maybe Dave will correct me and I'll mention it in another episode, but someone who has no idea what the theme, the overall arcing theme of the
right.
set is, the visual theme, the story theme of the set is, can look at one picture and just say, that's gothic. Boom. And that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
He could not have been any more spot on. And that's what we're dealing with, right? Like, that's the... Innistrad was the most flavorful block, I think, in years. And in terms of art, in terms of story, now we're in Shadows over Innistrad block, and I don't think they've disappointed. You know, we're in our episode, our third episode. The first one was a super 180 from Oath of the Gatewatch. You know, it was super dark, super gritty. Now you've got Jason, Liliana, characters who we've seen in other places previously, as opposed to, so far, in the first two stories, we only saw characters who had ever existed in Innistrad.
Yeah.
And so now you see a character who is not from Innistrad being thrust into this gothic horror
Yes.
world environment, and it still works. It still works perfectly. He was chased by werewolves. He's kind of learning his own limits and his own shortcomings against these monsters.
And they basically say that we're going to learn more about that as we go.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there's a lot more stories left to go. These stories, as far as I can tell, just like Oath of the Gatewatch, will be going until just before Eldritch Moon comes out, and then the Eldritch Moon stories will just pick right up off there.
Yeah.
And then same thing up until the set after Eldritch Moon, which I don't think they've announced yet, so which would be the new block. But so there you go. Anything else you want to say about this episode, or are we good with this story?
I think we're good.
So, guys, thank you so much for watching. I loved this story.
Yeah, me too.
It was short, but I will say the Oath of the Gatewatch story, one of the, I think the second to last one, where they took the oath. You know what? It was the one where they took the oath. So maybe it was the third to last one. That story was short. It was shorter than this, and in my opinion, I thought it was terrible. I thought that story was bad. It needed to get out what it needed to get out, that they took the oath and that they said these things, but that's literally all it was. You know, they came out of a cave, they talked to one another, they convinced one another to take this oath, they took the oath for whatever different reasons they had for taking the oath, and the story was over. And it was super short, and it was super kind of unsatisfying, I feel like.
Yeah.
You know, and yet...
It felt kind of open-ended almost, which I guess is kind of what they were trying to do, because the more open-ended and vague these stories are, the more they can add to them later.
Yes. And yet, in this one, super short, 2 characters with speaking parts, because the guide said and were the only like words that, you know, in quotations, was the only time that he ever spoke. But otherwise it was Jason and Liliana with talking parts. And yet I felt like this story was perfect. Start to finish, it was great. It didn't need anything more.
Yeah.
It didn't need more characters. It didn't need more discussion between them. It got out a ton of exposition, which I appreciated, because it gives us kind of a heads up as to what's going on in the future. And the importance of what was said, I'm sure, isn't even known to us yet until we get there. You know,
Yeah.
it might even be the kind of thing where it comes up in a later story and you're like, oh, Liliana mentioned something about that. And it's something you didn't even think of that was important. So we'll see. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this episode. This has been JaAR. I've been Joe.
Amy.
If you guys will subscribe down below, you'll find out when all of these videos come out, when all of the other videos on our channel are coming out. As I said, pre-release is in 2 weeks. We've got something super special planned for the pre-release. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel. Definitely subscribe. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You'll also find out when videos come out from there. I hope you enjoy what's coming up. I'm really enjoying everything leading up to Shadows over Innistrad. I'm super excited. We'll be back to you next week for episode 4 for the next story, and we'll see where it goes from there. Because it seems like that one they're intentionally being mysterious. At least before this one, we knew it was Jace. The next one, I have no idea what's about to happen, so we'll see. Presumably, it looks like it's not following Jace, so it seems like they're going to jump around a little bit.
Liliana's going to meet Jace in the dungeon.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Gonna happen.
That's not going to happen. It's not that kind of a story. I'm sure people will be writing fan fictions about it.
That's true. Yes. I'm sure
Anyway,
there'll be plenty of those.
Yeah. So, guys, once again, thank you so much for watching. We say it every time. I'll say it multiple times. I totally mean it. And guys, we will see you all in the next video, whichever video of ours you watch next. We will see you all next time. Thanks, guys.